Representative Mark Kirk, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel as we're here on Republican Day at the State Fair. What is your impression of the chances, let's say overall, the Republican Party in 2010?
They're increasingly good, especially with a Rasmussen poll that came out on Monday showing Kirk 41, Janulius 38. It's a good early indicator of increasing momentum for our campaign.
As you've been out on the campaign trail, what are the issues that have been particularly resonating with the voters that they're giving you the feedback on?
I think there are four top issues in the campaign. The first issue is the economy, the second issue is the economy, the third issue is the economy, and the fourth is health care. And so we think that we shouldn't tax as much, we shouldn't borrow as much. I'm particularly concerned about Warren Buffett's warning on Sunday that the federal debt is becoming a danger to our economic recovery. And of course, you can't go anywhere in America without talking about concerns about the health care legislation from Speaker Pelosi. I will vote against it and wrote the alternative that has three main pillars. First, we have the Medical Rights Act that says Congress should make no law interfering with decisions that you've made with your doctor. Second, defensive medicine reforms like lawsuit reform and fully electronic medical records owned by the patient, so you seamlessly go to specialists without repeating tests. And lastly, breaking up little insurance monopolies, because Americans should be allowed to buy insurance from any state in the union, and individuals should get the same tax break employers get when they buy health insurance. That's what we're for. What we're against is we shouldn't borrow $1 trillion, and we shouldn't approve the tax increase in the health bill, which increased the total marginal rate for the state of Illinois to 49.9%. Ironically, that's 4 points higher than France.
Let me ask, when the Republicans had control of the Congress, some of the Republican faithful said, why do we need Republicans to be spending like drunken sailors? And the party got away from its roots. Do you think you learned anything in that experience, or has anything changed within the party?
The Republican Party lost its way earlier on with a corrupt governor, Governor Ryan, that I urged remain in jail and finish his term, and too much spending. I'm a fiscal conservative, the only member of the Appropriations Committee, Republican or Democrat, that doesn't earmark funds, and the Kirk Amendment helped kill the bridge to nowhere, which will now not be built. I'm very concerned about things like the stimulus package, in which 80% of the funds that we're borrowing will go for social spending. And once the borrowed funds runs out, you have very little economic foundation. And so I think we need a change of course in Washington to borrow and tax less.
Not too long ago, you appeared with David Walker, who has been a champion and out there calling about the fiscal danger that lies in the growing debt. But he also was very critical of the Medicare Part D, the pharmacy program that was passed, saying that that was one of the most irresponsible fiscal things that had been done, and again was passed under Republican Congress and a Republican president. How did you vote on that? Do you still support that program if you voted for it? And let me just have you answer that.
I voted for it, and I strongly supported it. And much of the story of Medicare Part D worked better than expected. It had a startup problem because we were starting a program for 37 million Americans. But luckily, we had heavy competition in the program. And so according to the Congressional Budget Office, costs were dramatically less than expected. And that's really helped out on other programs. I think a key here in the future is looking at competition and reform. Like, we can't consider a health care bill that has no legal reforms. We already see failed states like New Jersey, which costs $5,500 a person to insure. And that's because they have no lawsuit reform and incredible administrative burdens. And ironically, despite the image of California, they have rock and roll on lawsuit reform. And their health care insurance costs are half of New Jersey's. Avoiding problems in the states like what we see in New Jersey and repeating the successes in states like in California is what a real healthcare reform should be about.
And you talked about competition, having insurance companies be able to sell over state lines. What about going back on that Medicare Part D, where we didn't allow the government to price out the Medicare pharmacy? Is that something you would like to change?
Absolutely, because the government should be allowed to compete, and it's been a great success in the Veterans Administration.
on just foreign. You're a military officer. You've served overseas. How would your term as a U.S. Senator, the kind of issues you would support, how do you imagine that would be different than what we have had as citizens of Illinois in the U.S. Senate over the last 6 years?
Well, I served 19 years in the Navy. I'm still in the Navy, was on duty last weekend. I was the first member of Congress to serve in an imminent danger area since 1942 when I deployed to Afghanistan in Kandahar. For me, veterans health care has been a core of my service as a congressman. They nearly closed the Veterans Hospital in my district. I stopped that, and we are going through a $100 million expansion that will be named after a local hero, Captain James A. Lovell Jr., the commander of Apollo 13. But now as a candidate for Senate, I've visited other veterans health facilities. For example, the big Veterans Health Facility in Danville. They haven't had a new building built there for over 20 years. And upgrading the infrastructure of that facility is something that our next senator should make a priority.
All right. Congressman Mark Kirk, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Congressman, to follow up, you talked about your fiscal conservative.
John Aaron.